In this video, I'm going to share a really common trap that I see a lot of people falling into around retirement income planning, and it really kind of scares me. Hi, I'm Camille Gaines. On this channel and on my website, retirecertain.com, I share our adventure from kind of a scary financial future to financial independence, starting about age 50, using both traditional investments and investment strategies around stocks and bonds, and also alternative income and investment strategies that are often ignored in traditional retirement planning. In this video, I want to talk specifically about a trap or an assumption that's often made around retirement planning, and that is that we all know that traditionally, or historically, I should say, not traditionally, stocks have returned an annual return, an annualized return, I should say, of about 10% a year over very long periods of time. And I think what happens with people with retirement income planning is they're thinking that they will be able to live off of their investments because they're invested in stocks. Now, it may be that stocks have done very well in recent years and or they're thinking over very long time periods that annualized return of about 10% would easily allow them to withdraw, 4-5% every year to live. But what I want to do is I want to debunk that assumption and that myth and sort of a trap. And here's why. A lot of people don't understand a few points around this. Let me back up first and say that a 4% retirement withdrawal is kind of a very common rule for retirement planning. And a lot of people now use 3%, but 4 is kind of the original assumption around retirement planning. And I've made other videos about why I'm not crazy about that and why we chose not to use that. I'll put a link above so you can check that out. And make sure you stay tuned, because the last point I want to make is super, super important. And it's a retirement income planning strategy that we use that really, really changed things for us. So let me get back to, so that 10% annualized return, let me explain exactly what that's made up of, because I didn't realize this after I've been investing a long time. That annualized return is made up of 3 things, and those 3 things are the amount of gain on the investment. So in the stock market, so say that the stock market goes up during the year, then that's going to be one of the things that makes up that annualized return. And that's whether or not you sell it. It increased in value, right? It can go back down, but that's another video, okay? That increase in value. Say you're probably going to be in a fund or in index funds or ETFs or something, but just say hypothetically you bought a stock for $100 and it went to $110. Why don't we use just a specific stock example to explain this better? So it went from $100 to $110, so you had that $10 gain there. So that's going to be part of that annualized return that you see that is historically around 10%. The next part of that is going to be dividends. So let's say that stock pays a 2% dividend, then that is going to be part of the equation for that annualized about 10% return over long periods of time for the stock market. And then there's one more thing that's commonly associated with that, or it's not associated, it's calculated in an annualized return, and that's the compounding of each of those things. So that is based on an assumption that your money is in there and it's compounding. So in other words, you're not withdrawing those dividends to live on, you're letting them stay in there and compound, as well as that increase in value. That example we gave from the $100 to the $110, you're leaving all that in there to compound. And compounding is just a really wonderful thing. But a lot of people don't realize that is what makes up that annualized return. There's one more thing that's not talked about as much, and I was trying to decide whether to go there or not, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there because it sort of blew my mind when I became aware of this, and it's super important. It's hardly ever talked about, and that is that inflation is also making up part of that annualized return, right? Because assets sometimes rise in value because of inflation, right? So it's really kind of that annualized return is made up of 4 things. I don't want to go into too much detail around that. I just want to throw that out there so that you'll be aware that inflation is part of that return that we get, that increase in value from our investments, our assets over time. So you can see how still you may be thinking in your head, well, 10%, shoot, that's pretty good. If I withdraw or live off 4%, then I've got another 6%. Well, the problem with that is that some years you're not going to have that second layer that I mentioned, and then on my website I write an article about it, and my metaphor is a chocolate layer cake, right? But that middle layer, those capital gains, that increase in value, you're not going to have that every single year. So I mentioned if you bought the stock for $100 and it went up to $110, then some years that may go down from $100 to $60 or $70 or $50 based on history, right? Or even worse. So you're not going to have that every year. In fact, we can go through long periods of time where you're not going to have that. While bear markets typically don't last that long, maybe a year and a half, we have had periods like the first decades of the 2000s when we had those 2 bear markets. So over that 10-year period, we had a slightly negative return in the stock market. The annualized return was slightly negative for about 10 years. So oops, that can really throw things when you're headed into retirement and something like that happens, in which case it really blows the whole thing of being able to withdraw money from the capital gains, that increase in value. Of course, you'd still have the dividends if you held onto the stocks, but the compounding of those increase in values, the increase wouldn't be happening, so the compounding would be an issue as well, right? So that can really cause problems, and we know that bear market's a reality of stock market investing. I'll put a link to another video where I explain this in more detail. Now, one workaround that we found that we really liked was creating income generating assets instead of just planning on withdrawing our money in retirement. So we started out with some assets, some more traditional investments that paid a higher income. We actually, I've said that we started in oil partnerships, but initially I found a really nice bond fund that had a really good yield, and it was a higher yielding bond fund, very well run, that had a nice yield. But now it's so hard to get any income from bonds, right? We invested in an oil partnership that had a higher yield, then we ventured into rental real estate properties, and then we also started selling some covered calls and doing some option strategies and other things that turned out to generate more income. And we ended up with online businesses. Not to overwhelm you, but to throw out, there's all these possibilities, and this wasn't all at once. It was over a really long period of time, and I'm sharing here what I learned in hindsight, looking back and doing all this. And what we did, I like to back up on my channel here and on my website when I present information around this, and where we were when we said, what are we going to do when we didn't want to plan on living off retirement withdrawals, when we saw we didn't have enough income generated from our investments and we didn't want to withdraw. So it is a problem when people think that they're going to have that 10% annual return, annualized return, as it's referred to in the correct lingo, and that will somehow fund that 4% retirement withdrawal every year when they're doing their retirement income planning. So I wanted to mention that to you. Oh, the other thing I want to mention is that with the retirement income strategies, you get to leave that capital intact. So you don't have to withdraw down that capital, as I've talked about in other videos. I'll put a link so you can check that out. But it's super important to understand that it's not about depleting that money in your retirement savings. It's about generating income so that you can live off your income instead of spending down your capital that you have in your retirement accounts. Now, I had said that I was going to save one tip or one thing we really saw in hindsight that really, gave us perspective, and I hope it will give you perspective as well. And that was, once we got these income streams going, which did eventually replace job income completely and more, we said, gosh, this is good, because we can just wait until we're older to even withdraw from our retirement accounts, and we enjoy what we're doing. It does take some work, absolutely. We think it's pretty fun. If we want to scale back and do something more passive, we can, but it's given us the ability to defer withdrawing from retirement, or saying, let's withdraw 1% a year instead of the 4%, or withdraw 2% a year, and let's keep this income stream. We'll have this from real estate or this from online business or whatever it is, as part of a overall wealth plan. I write about our Rise wealth plan on my website. I'll put a link below and you can grab that report so you can see these different elements, and it will make more sense to you. If you found this helpful, I bet you'll like this video, so be sure to watch it. Thanks.